They say never meet your heroes, and it's a wise piece of advice, because one of the men I used to look up and admire so much has turned into the most despicable, vile wrestler I've ever had the misfortune of laying my eyes on. Paul Orndorff. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tyler Vance Rants. I am your host, Tyler Vance himself, and you're not. It's April 27th, 1985. Last week in the National Wrestling Alliance, the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes was awarded with a brand new NWA World Television Championship belt by Jim Crockett Jr., while both Ole Anderson and Thunderbolt Patterson claimed they were both the rightful NWA National Tag Team Champions, while in the World Wrestling Federation, Roddy Piper made a confession to Jesse the Body Ventura. If Ventura had been Piper's partner at WrestleMania instead of Paul Orndorff, WWF Champion Hulk Hogan and Mr. T would still be laid up in the hospital somewhere recovering from their injuries. Before I get into the episode proper, I do want to touch on something that happened yesterday, April 26, 1985, on WWF TNT. The footage of that TNT is just so hard to come by that it's been referred to as the Lost TNT, but I did manage to find the most important piece of footage from it, so here you go.
I'm your manager. You were Paul Orndorff. When I made you Mr. Wonderful and you sit there and listen to me while I talk, I want everybody else out there to listen. You're fired. I've never had a woman break up with me. I've never had a deal fall through, and I'll be damned if I'm going to be fired by a man like Paul Orndorff.
Because so much drama has been caused by the formerly wonderful Paul Orndorff, we're going to be tuning into the WWF's flagship show, Championship Wrestling First this week, where Vince McMahon and the living legend Bruno Sammartino greet us on commentary for the first match. Mr. X and Charlie Fulton take on the Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana in tag team action. The Dog and Santana's success and teamwork screams as if they'd been teaming for 3 years, not just 3 weeks. JYD's clothesline leads right into Tito Santana's figure 4 leg lock, forcing Mr. X to submit. After the match, the rabid animal grabs a hapless young girl from the audience and forces his partner to dance with her. Call animal control. The WWF update this week is focused on Ricky Steamboat, who Lord Awful Alfred Hayes describes as
very, very athletic and very good looking.
What's the matter, pal? Did Wendy Richter keep fainting at the sight of your teeth and the smell of your breath so you have no choice but to hit on Ricky Steamboat now? So what does this British buffoon have to say about Ricky Steamboat rather than he looks good? The obvious. He is one of the fastest rising stars in the World Wrestling Federation, and it will be no time at all before Steamboat is competing for championships. I'm sure if he doesn't get there himself, he'll go back to what was so effective for him in the NWA and just start crying till he gets his way. Brutus Beefcake, accompanied by his manager, luscious Johnny Valiant, takes on Jim Young in singles action next. Young is able to latch on a side headlock at the sound of the bell, and Beefcake doesn't seem to know how to get out of it. That is until he hears his manager tell him to hit a back suplex from ringside. That's why managers matter, people. Brutus Beefcake rebounds, starting his counterattack with a body slam, while the animals in the crowd begin to chant.
Fans beginning to chant fruitcake.
Chant all you want, losers, because a high knee puts this fruitcake in the winners column. More tag team action follows as Moondog Spot and Bobby Wade take on the US Express of Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. Despite losing the WWF Tag Team Championships to the current champions, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff at WrestleMania, the US Express have not missed a beat and are on top of their opponents from bell to bell, with a bulldog from Windham on Wade securing them the win. The magnificent Muraco finally has his manager, Mr. Fuji, with him, after the manager successfully resolved the dispute regarding his harem in Saudi Arabia, as he's set to face off against Mr. Italy, Salvatore Bellomo, one-on-one next. Look at this Italian goof thinking he's clever by cartwheeling over Muraco. Well, the magnificent one is smarter, simply stepping aside when the Italian attempts a dropkick seconds later. A swinging neckbreaker follows before Salvatore Bellomo is draped over the top rope neck first. It doesn't stop there, as the magnificent Muraco then guillotines his opponent with the bottom rope before slapping Mr. Italy down to the floor. Back in the ring, Bellomo attempts a desperate cross-body rebound, but he gets caught and put away in magnificent fashion for the 3 following a tombstone pile driver. Remember the footage I showed you at the beginning of the episode focused on Paul Orndorff? Well, his former manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, is a guest of his former tag team partner, Rowdy Roddy Piper, on this segment of Piper's Pit. I'm sure they'll have plenty of nice things to say about Orndorff's new delusional outlook on pro wrestling.
The world's biggest no-good lowlife ingrate has fired me. What?
Heenan is so infuriated with being fired by Paul Orndorff that he absolutely destroys Piper's Pit, while both Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton look on in disbelief that Paul Orndorff himself would do something so stupid. Steve Lombardi faces off against David Sammartino following Piper's Pit, and if Lombardi were the son of the living legend, then he too could have performed at the level that Sammartino does throughout the entire match, who quickly secures a win with a power slam. The main event of WWF Championship Wrestling is 6-man tag team action. Ron D, Jose Luis Rivera, and the New Zealand Nightmare Tony Garea take on the WWF Tag Team Champions, the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff, along with George the Animal Steele, who we haven't seen since December at Paul Vachon's wedding.
Talk about your bearskin rug.
Talk about your perverted freaks. Don't throw rocks in glass houses, Vince McMahon, you disgusting piece of crap. Garea starts things off for his team, hitting the Iron Sheik with a hip toss and a body slam before tagging in Rivera, who latches on a side headlock before hitting the WWF Tag Team Champion with a crossbody. Jose Luis Rivera then gets a little bit too excited, which leads to incredible sloppiness, considering he never thought he'd get this far against someone the caliber of the Iron Sheik, catching the Iranian's boot before the Iron Sheik follows it up with a massive backdrop. Steele then gets the tag and immediately takes a chunk out of Rivera's forehead, who then flees for his life and tags in D, who gets thrown around like a ragdoll by the animal, submitting to an elevated hammerlock. You know, I still can't get Paul Orndorff's dumb decisions out of my head. Why the hell would you fire Bobby the Brain Heenan? You're committing career suicide. Before I start trashing this room, it's time to tune into the National Wrestling Alliance's flagship show, World Championship Wrestling. Crotchety David Crockett and Tony Schiavone greet us as WCW gets underway for the first match. The Italian Stallion and Gerald Finley take on the Minnesota Wrecking Crew of Arn and Ole Anderson. The Stallion and Finley do everything in their power to simply survive, as they are systematically decimated by both Andersons, who secure a win as Ole Anderson comes off of the top rope with a knee to the shoulder into a shoulder lock submission. Tony Schiavone's first guest is the NWA National Heavyweight Champion, Ron Garvin, who takes a shot at Tully Blanchard for some reason, stating that if Blanchard ever wants a shot at the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes and the NWA World Television Championship ever again, Tully Blanchard will first have to go through Ron Garvin. Oh, but it's okay, because Ronnie's gonna put his championship on the line too. What the hell kind of strategy is that? Putting your NWA National Heavyweight Championship on the line against someone like Tully Blanchard is just asking for him to take it from you. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. The American Delusion Dusty Rhodes is Tony Schiavone's next guest backstage, and the NWA World Television Champion has brought a special friend with him, a cage, kissing it and asking how it's doing.
Hey baby, how you doing? Yeah, do what? Not right now, darling.
Is Rhodes okay? No, he isn't. But Rhodes has a plan, and what a stupid plan it is. He's going to bring a live gorilla, placing it in the cage that the American Delusion just made moves on, comparing the animal to the NWA World and 6-man Tag Team Champions, the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff, his nephew the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff, along with Crusher Khrushchev.
Oh, I got to get away from her because she's always talking to me.
Maybe you should just go away for good. A person who did leave the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes behind for good was the raging loser, Manny Fernandez, who's in singles action next against Doug Vines and comes away with an easy win following a flying forearm. Tony Schiavone's next guest is the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who puts his 2 cents into the controversy surrounding the NWA National Tag Team Championships involving Ole Anderson and Thunderbolt Patterson, stating that it will be no doubt the Minnesota Wrecking Crew who comes out on top. Woo! Also, a reminder that Flair has an open challenge to anyone who thinks they're good enough to beat the man for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Bob Roop is in action next against the Golden Terror. Roop is able to control the early portions of the match with a mixture of holds, before ramming the shoulder of the Terror into one of the turnbuckles. Bob Roop then goes on to weaken the Golden Terror's shoulder further, winning the match with a shoulder breaker. The NWA World and 6-Man Tag Team Champions, the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff and his nephew the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff, are Tony Schiavone's next guests backstage, and neither Russian took offense at the demented delusions that Dusty Rhodes rambled on about earlier. You might be asking yourself why they weren't offended, and I get it. Most people in 2024 do not have thick skin, so let me help you understand.
Nothing can stop us.
To make it even better, Nikita Koloff used to wrestle bears when he was still in Russia, so the prospect of facing off against a live gorilla next week really just excites the Russian Nightmare.
Nikita would make him into a chimpanzee.
Lee Ramsey takes on Tully Blanchard one-on-one next, and as always, Blanchard has brought his Perfect 10 baby doll with him. And before we get into the match, I'd like to point out something interesting. Mike Fever, who used to wrestle in Jim Crockett Promotions, has transitioned to the role of referee. When you can't take the heat, you get out of the kitchen. After shaking Ramsey's hand at the sound of the bell, the delay tactics that Tully Blanchard employs make quick work of his opponent, finishing him off with a slingshot suplex. NWA National Heavyweight Champion Ron Garvin is in singles action next against George South in a non-title match. He's saving it for Tully Blanchard, remember? Garvin gets a near fall seconds into the match with a simple pin attempt, but the NWA National Heavyweight Champion is known as the Fists of Stone, putting those hands to use by slapping South. A sit-out leads to another 2 count before a huge backdrop knocks George South down hard. From there, a gut-wrench suplex splash combination gets Ron Garvin the 3. Tony Schiavone should be in awe of his guests Paul Jones, Abdullah the Butcher, Superstar, Billy Graham, and the Barbarian, the elite soldiers that comprise Paul Jones's army. Unfortunately, the moronic masses in the crowd are so vitriolic towards Jones and his men that the interview is cut short.
You don't want to hear it? Well, you better shut up before I kick every one of you out of here.
The NWA United States Heavyweight Championship is on the line next as Magnum TA defends against Scott Hog Irwin, while the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, joins guest commentary. Flair is certain that Magnum will come for him and wants to be ready for when that day comes. Hey Ronnie Garvin, take some notes. Irwin jumps Magnum at the sound of the bell, not giving the NWA United States Heavyweight Champion an opportunity to breathe before he hits a body slam and a leg drop. A dropkick from the Hog follows for another 2 count before a fist cuts his opponent's head open. Scott Irwin's offensive continues, lifting Magnum TA to the top rope, but that dumb referee gets involved, which directly allows the champion to hit a knee, following it up with a belly-to-belly suplex and puts the challenger away for the 3. Are you kidding me? Scott Hog Irwin was robbed. Where did that goof referee get his license anyways? I want him fined, I want him suspended, and I want his referee's license revoked. Tully Blanchard, who's as always accompanied by his Perfect 10 baby doll, is Tony Schiavone's next guest backstage.
Baby doll, the Perfect 10, a winner and a match on
My
our first
Perfect 10.
Okay,
Schiavone.
your Perfect 10.
Get it right, Schiavone. Keep your eyes on Blanchard and your hands where we can see him, you creep. Tully Blanchard, Ron Garvin, the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. It's happening, and only so Blanchard can get his hands on the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes and what rightfully belongs to him in the NWA World Television Championship.
I made the television championship what it is today.
He'll be a double champion before long, mark my words.
There's the belt of the World Television Champion. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, back with us.
The only reason the NWA World Television Champion, the American Delusion, Dusty Rhodes, shows up to talk to Tony Schiavone again is because he is a self-indulgent psycho. And guess what? He wants more gold, stating the issue between him and the Nature Boy Ric Flair over the NWA World Heavyweight Championship is far from over before that tub of lard stays on guest commentary for the next match. Mike Jackson and Paul Garner take on the NWA World and Six-Man Tag Team Champions, Ivan and Nikita Koloff. Because of the American Delusion's propaganda, crotchety David Crockett reveals just how little of an IQ he truly has by referring to the Russians as
Gorilla. Gorilla.
Gorilla.
Gorilla. Gorilla.
throughout the entire match. Meanwhile, the Koloffs are a force to be reckoned with in this non-title match while being unfairly mocked and criticized by the commentators, controlling their opponents with a mixture of power moves and teamwork before getting the win with a Russian sickle.
Look at Nikita pressing down. Paul Gardner.
Immediately following the match, the Russian bear Ivan Koloff rushes the commentary booth to shout at the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes about his inappropriate and unprofessional behavior throughout the entire night. Dusty Rhodes can only respond by calling Koloff
You are nurturing a gorilla. You running around with gorillas. You from the gorilla family.
because Rhodes is a one-trick pony, and that one trick is still more IQ than that idiot has in his cracked skull. Half of the In Limbo NWA National Tag Team Champions, Thunderbolt Patterson, goes one-on-one with Randy Barber, while the rightful half and true owner of the NWA National Tag Team Championships, Ole Anderson, joins guest commentary, along with his cousin-turned-brother, Arn Anderson. The Minnesota Wrecking Crew are absolutely sick and tired of waiting for Thunderbolt Patterson to do the right thing and hand over his half of the NWA National Tag Team Championships, because the belt is basically just stolen property at this point. Patterson himself catches sight of his nemesis on the commentary booth with one eye while keeping the other on his opponent, making his already lazy style of wrestling suffer even further. After taking a period of time to collect himself, Patterson hits a double thrust on Barber to get the 3.
You heard it? There they go. The Andersons are in the ring.
While Patterson is rightfully beaten within an inch of his life, that idiot's partner, the raging loser Manny Fernandez, comes rushing to the rescue. But it's too little, too late. The Minnesota Wrecking Crew have sent their message before they make a tactical withdrawal. Tyler, why don't you get angry when the Nature Boy Ric Flair shows up more than once and is mentioned throughout the entire episode, like you do with the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes? Because Flair is the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and he's Tony Schiavone's next guest backstage. Apparently, all the women in Texas refer to the Nature Boy
The all-around cowboy. Now you figure it out for yourself.
before he goes on to state that if the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes really wants to settle the score they've had since Starrcade last November, then there's an open challenge for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, you goof! He put it out last week, and he already reminded everybody about it again this week. Dusty Rhodes, you really are stupid. Pistol Pez Whatley competes in a blisteringly fast match against Vernon Deaton next, winning easily following a flying forearm splash combination. I bet you'll never guess who's backstage next. If you guessed the American Delusion Dusty Rhodes, well then pat yourself on the back, because you're officially smarter than the NWA World Television Champion. He's alongside the Boogie Woogie Maniac Jimmy Valiant, who can't speak because of the attack that he suffered last week on the NWA secondary show Worldwide Wrestling.
Jimmy's got his old lady. It's Jimmy Valiant. The Boogie Woogie Man's got his old lady. His old lady's been knocked out of the ring. Here comes Paul Jones. What are they going to do? They got it. They got that axe handle up. They got possession.
Wasn't that great? I loved every single second of it. And even better is when bias Bob Caudle announces
The National Wrestling Alliance has banned this weapon. Also, Jimmy Valiant has been fined by the National Wrestling Alliance,
oh, joyous days.
as well as has Paul Jones, the Barbarian, and Superstar Billy Graham. It's possible that those three are going to be suspended.
Are you kidding me? They defended themselves against an unprovoked, unwarranted attack from behind, and they're fined and facing possible suspension? Make it make sense! Speaking on behalf of Jimmy Valiant, Dusty Rhodes informs everyone that the Boogie Woogie Maniac does not want the Russians suspended, before stating that he's about to partner up with the American Delusion as the two of them plan to face off against Paul Jones's army. Oh, for the love of Rocky King takes on a returning cowboy Ron Bass, who's accompanied by his manager James J. Dillon in singles action next. The former NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion has been absolutely infuriated ever since losing that championship to the current champion of Avalanche, Buzz Tyler. And he takes his frustration out on King with a plethora of power moves, including a backbreaker, slamming Rocky King's head into the turnbuckle, and finally a power slam before applying the Iron Claw, crushing his opponent's skull to get the win. The NWA United States Heavyweight Champion Magnum T is Tony Schiavone's final guest backstage, and the champion states his match earlier against Scott Hogg Irwin.
Since I've had this title, that was probably the toughest competitor that I've faced.
Yeah, I bet. And you're still the NWA United States Heavyweight Champion only because you paid off that crooked goof referee earlier. Magnum then sends out a challenge to the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy Ric Flair.
It won't matter if you're custom made from head to toe or what kind of clothes you got on, because when I set my mind on something, I've been known to go out and do it.
The main event of NWA World Championship Wrestling can simply be likened to a war crime as Mike Simani, Gene Ligon, and Ron Rossi are dissected by Paul Jones's army of Abdullah the Butcher, Superstar Billy Graham, and the Barbarian, who easily secure victory as the show and the week come to an end. It's terrible how greed and pride can lead a wrestler down the path of evil. I mean, just take a look at what happened to the Shame of the USA, Don Kernodle, when his pride directly led to the loss of his and the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff's NWA World Tag Team Championships. Look at what happened to Captain Lou Albano, who's currently leeching off of Cyndi Lauper's popularity, while forgetting his clients and friends that helped him to get where he is today. And look at Paul Orndorff, who used to be so wonderful until he showed his true colors, both at WrestleMania, directly causing his and Rowdy Roddy Piper's loss to WWF Champion Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. And then again yesterday on TNT when he fired Bobby the Brain Heenan as his manager. The depths of depravity that these so-called men are willing to go to in an effort to pander to the moronic masses that make up the fan base of professional wrestling is outright sickening. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tyler Vance Rants. Don't forget to hit the bell, like the video, and subscribe so you can be proud of all the wealth that I share to you with good pro wrestling content. You can also follow me on social media where it is 1985 in pro wrestling all over again. That's all for now. I'll see you next week. So long. And forces Tito Santana to dance with her in some kind of for his inappropriate and unprofessional behavior all night. What did I do that for?